Welcome to Global Village Show. This is your host Ahmed Kassim, and thank you for joining us today. We have two guests today. We are honored to have Mr. Don Weisbeck. He was a three-term mayor of the city of Brooks. And we have also Ajak Goot, who is from Brooks, and he's a supervisor with Excel Lakeside, and who happened to be considered to be a new Canadian as well. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Ahmed. Glad to be here.
Don, would you please give us a little bit about yourself, a little bit background?
Sure. Linda and I moved to Brooks in 1988 to build and operate McDonald's restaurant, and we operated till 2000. In 1998, I became mayor of Brooks and was there for 9 years, 3 terms, and enjoyed it immensely, and probably one of the career highlights. I had moved down from Whitehorse, Yukon, was an assistant deputy minister with the government, with the Yukon government at the time. Since leaving in the mayor's job in 07, I run a real estate business. I've got a number of properties in Brooks and other places in Alberta, and 5 young grandchildren, and heavily involved in the volunteer sector, particularly Ashton's Place, the youth center that I've been a part of since it began 6 years ago.
Okay, thank you very much. What about Ajak? I think you give us a description of yourself last time, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
So you want to give us a little bit more about, you work at Lakeside, and
Yeah, I work at Lakeside since Don Weisbeck was a mayor at that time. He's the one welcome our communities that time. I've been in Brooks almost 13 years now. So when he was the mayor the first time, I was in town. And then we knocked few doors. One of those doors, his office, and he helped us. And we established ourselves as a new Canadian. And this is a good chance to thank him.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
well, that's good to hear from our friend Ajak. I think when he first arrived to Brooks, Don Weisbeck was the mayor.
Yeah, it was strange to me because I just came from Africa. He's a mayor, but he's a very humble guy. He always working, talking on cell phone. And instead, bodyguards, like Africa, you know that, bodyguards and fancy car and stuff like that. No, he's just walking around.
Probably the odd time I should have had a bodyguard, but anyway, most of the time probably not. Probably not as essential as some of the places you came from, Ajak.
I think he's still walking and talking on his cell, I think.
Yeah, that's his favorite. Always walking across the town, like walking. And I remember one day he knocked my doors, and it was one of the elections. One lady was running against him that time, and they held that election in Griffin Park School. So I was there, and I said, I don't think she gonna beat this guy. I don't think so, because it was popular and everybody loved him. As a mayor, you don't know what is going on in town, but I know you know it. But people talking, you're the best in that time. You're the best.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, at least we have a new Canadian who still remembers your time being a mayor the city of Brooks, and still appreciates your input at the time. Coming back, I think you were also the mayor of Brooks when we had the influx of the immigrants, especially from the African continent. Being a cowboy city, Brooks itself from the southeast of Alberta, people were not that much have that much knowledge about immigrants and all that stuff. So you happened to be mayor at that time when you had tall black guys coming to the city of Brooks. So how did you find that challenge, and how you think the community have overcome that problem?
Yeah, there's no question that change is hard on people, regardless of where you come from, and it's hard. It'd be silly to admit that there weren't issues. I mean, in 1995, I believe Lakeside was basically a locally owned group of people, and they sold out to Iowa beef packers at the time, and Iowa beef packers decided to expand the plant considerably, up to I think about 2,500 employees, and actually the initial group of people that came in were from Newfoundland, and even that in itself, because Brooks was basically a Caucasian community. There weren't even that many Aboriginal Canadians, Native Canadians in town, and as you called it, a cowboy town, cowboy oil and gas town, and the Newfoundlanders came in by unlike visible minorities such as yourselves, we used to sort of jokingly and friendly call them the visible or the verbal minority, because you couldn't tell they were different until they started to speak. So, but anyway, and then after that, a few years after that, the African community started to come in. I believe there were a number of people from Sudan that came from Cuba that spoke Spanish, which was a little strange too, seeing a black person speaking Spanish. And then, of course, their family and friends came from refugee camps, and then a number of other countries came. So yes, there were challenges. There's no doubt. As I said, change is hard on people, and but then certain things happen. Like for example, in the BSE crisis that came along, and Lakeside was shut down, and all of a sudden the community realized that this $100 million payroll was important to the community because the cash registers weren't ringing as much as they were, and they suddenly realized that. At least from the economic point of view, that we needed these immigrants to, because there weren't enough of us to fill those jobs, and that was then, and that was back in 1995, and here we are, 17 years later. It's a much different community, a much more inclusive community. Not that there aren't issues still, but it's certainly come a long ways in 17 years.
But also being a 3-term mayor in the city during that time. Immigrants will definitely be the need of our society for many years to come, due to the aging population and the birth rate, which is logic to me, because of the strong economical that we foreseen for Canada for many years to come. And most of the Canadians appreciate most of the immigrants appreciate the Canadian way of hospitality, whether it's Brooks, County of Newell, or Alberta, or in general in Canada, because of where most of the immigrants come from, corrupted society, dictatorship, and all that. So the safety of the individual coming to this beautiful country is important too. But are we on the right path when it comes to diversity inclusion in the city and County of Newell, in your own mind, as of today?
In terms of, you're saying in terms of inclusion in every...
Yeah. Not only immigrant population, but also we have, when we talk about diversity, you talk about disabled people, you talk about other people that have disadvantage in life. Are we having that all in one basket?
Yeah, the right path, perhaps. I mean, we've got a long ways to go. I mean, the path has just started. I mean, there are a lot of things, but the city and the province and the federal government, they're working towards these things. I think there's attempts to set up organizations to integrate. I mean, I would like to see a lot more going on in the community, a lot more recognition, perhaps outside of City Hall, because sometimes in City Hall or in the legislature in Edmonton, they set up committees and they set up organizations, but whether the real gut reaction is there to do anything about it. I mean, we saw that with Newell Regional Expo that you and I were both on, and I think as a committee we tried to do things. I don't think personally we were successful as I would like to have seen it become, but and I'm not sure the community has sort of grasped that need as much as some of us have, but again, things take time. I mean, you can't be overly anxious. Matter of fact, if you are, you sometimes defeat your own efforts.
Well, I think there's a saying that Rome was not built in one day. It takes time for the both sides of the aisle to understand each other.
And the other thing you said about immigration in terms economically, we do need it. We as, let's call it, if you call yourselves the new Canadians, we'll call us the old Canadians. As old Canadians, we aren't reproducing enough people to look after even, work in Fort McMurray in the oil patch or anywhere else, let alone Lakeside and that sort of thing. So if we are going to prosper, if we're going to expand, if we're going to reach our economic potential, immigration has to be a big part of our society in the future.
Yeah, because the fact still remains is, and I listen both sides of the aisle, is there's few people from the mainstream Canadian that feel that when immigrant person comes here, they feel they're entitled for something, whether a government assistant or whatever that is. They always go back to when their fathers or their great-great-great-grand that come to this country, they face difficult challenge with no help or with no entitlement from anyone. So that is one thing that sometimes they don't get that easy to understand. And I always give them that the fact that remains, I personally can honestly speak for myself. I'm not entitled for anything other than what I work. There are a lot of immigrants who does the same thing what I do, and they work hard, they are honest. So if we generalize people, then we're putting everyone in one basket. Then you feel that, yes, there are some immigrants that look for maybe entitlement, but that's them. But there are also a large number of immigrants that don't feel they're entitled anything other than they work hard because they came from a tough background. They are honest. They are good citizens in our society.
No, I think you're right. And yes, they do take back, like my grandfather came to Saskatchewan and he homesteaded. Now, to say he got nothing is unfair because he each got a quarter section of land that was given to them. But times back in the late 1800s, early 1900s certainly were tougher for all of us, including them as well as any of us, and things have changed. Society is wealthier than that, and yes, I think you're absolutely right, Ahmed. I mean, there are people, there are blacks and any country in the world that that push the system in terms of getting entitlement, but there are people in there are, let's call them old Canadians, Caucasians, that do the same thing, that would rather collect welfare or some other social service than work too. And I don't think it would be fair to single out somebody because of the color of their face. And I think that's such perhaps a natural reaction. You hear it a lot, even with respect to Native Canadians, Native Indians, and some of the benefits they get. And the legends tend to be a little more developed over beer at the Brooks Hotel or wherever it is, much more than the reality on the ground.
No, I thank you very much for that, because I think there are a lot of, and I do listen both sides of the aisle, because I talk to farmers who happen to be a real cowboy, and I visit them, and I respect their way of thinking. To me, it's a little bit ignorance, and I always refer to when I was running the election of 2010, which one of my colleagues came to me and he says, "Why are you running the city council election? You think they will elect you as a black man?" And I said, "No, thank you for reminding me that I'm a black." The fact that maybe I forgot being a black in this city. But the issue was not me running, was just to open up for other immigrants so they can take the path that everyone can reach the sky if they work hard, honest. And it's just to inspire the young guys to be part of the society. And I was not running to be to run off my race or minority, but I was running that I can bring something on the table for the betterment of the community in general, regardless of their color, skin, or the religion they believe, which I'm proud that I had a good number of voters vote for me. So it's always that perception of the both sides. So I think we came from a long way, from my personal opinion, and I think we still have a long way to go.
No, we do have a long way to go, but we have come a long ways. And I often say too that some people, and we're all human beings, some of us are often comfortable with our ignorance, and we're satisfied in that role.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not. Sometimes we have to accept that with each of us, whether it's within our own families or in the bigger sphere of society.
Yeah, I had an old man Safeway Safeway grocery. I was trying to pick up the 4-liter milk, and he was behind me, and he said, "Could you please grab me the milk?" I gave him, and he said, "Give me one more." So I gave him, and he looked at me and he says, "You are a true gentleman, this color." I would say he was about 70 or 75. So I did not take that an offense, and I said, "Thank you very much," because that's him truly thinking that he has never seen a black man maybe extending hand to him. It could be perceived that someone told him the wrong information. So ignorance again plays somebody's thinking. And I thank him very much, smile, and I said, "Have a nice, great day. Thank you for the complimentary."
He probably meant it as a compliment.
He meant
in
as
his
a
own
compliment,
way.
yeah. But I had a friend of mine at the time who happened to be mainstream Canadian. He was upset. for the gentleman saying that. And I said, why would you accept that? I said, you know what? Number one, that was not meant to you, that was meant to me. So you don't get upset for something that you have nothing to do with.
Yeah.
He was trying to tell the old man not to say that, but I said, you know, that's not the issue. That's an ignorance. So that is ignorant from what you just said a minute ago.
And to say, you know, you have to accept that. I mean, you've got an older person who's, you know, who's lived a life without, you know, without exposure to, let's say, people of other colors, and you have to accept that it'll be a lot harder for him to change than a, let's say, a high school student who, you know.
Coming back to Ajak, how do you see from your own perspective what Don is just mentioning about diverse inclusion in our own city? Being a new Canadian, I think the definition of new Canadian, I believe, is if you were not born here in Canada, then you still be as a new Canadian coming from overseas. If you've been here 25 years or 20 years, you're still new Canadian. So how you see that in our city and County of Newell?
Actually, the answer that the mayor just gave is the right one. We are in the right direction, actually, and but it's still little bit. But now the town, because his leadership provide a lot of open doors in town, so now we see a lot of different nationalities in town. So that shows the welcoming of the people that close with the decision maker or decision maker. So race is a natural thing, actually. We cannot stop that, but we can reduce it a little bit. We can just make it. Our job will be just be a good ambassadors to our backgrounds. And like he just said, really, there's some people that are very comfortable with their ignorance because they don't want to open up, they don't want to see different challenges. But I agree with the answer that he just, and I recall that one of he's the one opened, we have the Sudanese office. Actually, we ran a place and he came and opened the office that time. And people were completely happy with it. He came walking. Well, because just flow. He came walking.
So that's good old memory from our mayor then.
So that's encouraging everybody that the town is welcoming everybody. Yes, there's a few here and there, but it's a good town. It's a good town.
Okay, but also coming from the background of Africa, coming from South Sudan, which congratulations, July 9th were their first anniversary of independence after so long of problems. How do you see the independence of South Sudan, and what contribution you think the Canadians can make helping the South Sudanese?
Actually, we have first of all, like especially Canada and then Alberta particularly. We have oils in in Sudan, in South Sudan, and that one, and the oil now become like instead of blessing, become a curse to us, because our neighbors, they just trying to force us to the fight and stuff like that. So the knowledge that in Alberta, with the creative African Sudanese, will help to improve the new country, and then will help to like we can pass those knowledge to us. So my outcry is this: everybody is supposed to be welcome back in my new nation. We still need help. We need help from people that have long knowledge with the oil and other resources.
Thank you. I hope that will start from the new Canadians original from South Sudan to go back and help the society.
Actually, we have a lot of Canadians, South Sudanese Canadians.
Yeah.
They're back now. They're holding very good positions and they're helping to improve the country.
Okay, coming back, Don, why do you think the Wild Rose, which are the backbone of that, the party of Wild Rose in southeast of Alberta, why do you think they win the provincial election completely in southeast of Alberta?
Probably the main reason was a lot of frustration that went back even before Alison Redford's time and Ed Stelmach's time. Probably the one thing that stands out of everything is land use legislation. And that's Bill 36 that was introduced by Ted Morton and the Conservatives that basically allowed the government to take any land use right away from a person. It was, Keith Wilson, the lawyer that went around, called it the most draconian legislation of any democratic country on earth, where the cabinet could literally take your land, take your title, take everything. And that particularly got the rural area angry. And rural people are very politically active. If you ever go to a meeting outside of, not when you're running for the city of Brooks, but go to a politically, 70-80% of the people will be farmers. They are very politically active, and I think that's what started it. Rural people are also very conservative, and some of the things they were doing, like they're paying themselves the highest salaries in the land, and some of the other things, the healthcare fiasco where everything got sent. That was a big thing in Medicine Hat here too, was where everything got centralized to the super board in Edmonton. So there are a number of areas in, it's called the rural constituencies that, and Medicine Hat's kind of on the border of that because there are two constituencies. Well, one is part of the county 40 mile, but that got people angry more in the rural areas than in the city areas. And I think that's why we were successful in the rural areas, particularly southern Alberta, and perhaps because of the lack of realization, the lack of concern about some of these land use issues is perhaps why we weren't as successful in places like Edmonton and Calgary.
Would that make a little bit difficult for the communities of southeast of Alberta when it comes to the services in the BC government?
Okay, I think you're thinking of favoritism or the opposite of favoritism because we don't have a government representative. I can work both ways. I remember on election night we had one mayor indicating that we're kind of isolated now and because we had opposition members that we weren't treated as favor. And then I remember the same evening the mayor of Calgary indicating that perhaps they'll favor areas such as ours because they want to get the seat back. I mean, I would like to think the provincial programs are done for everybody and that, if they break down the super board and provide democratic elected health boards in the province, that's going to happen to Medicine Hat and Brooks and Strathmore as much as it's going to happen in Edmonton. So I don't know. I mean, I can look at it both ways. I look at, and I can't speak for the people of Medicine Hat, but I can speak for the people of Brooks, and I look for the last 4 years where we had a government member, and I'm not saying this negatively, but I can't think of anything where we were favored because of that or discriminated. You know what I mean? I think provincial programs hopefully would be applied equally, and a lot of times it's the person on the field, the people working on the field that are pushing for a particular thing and the reason for it rather than who your representative is.
So why you think then Daniel Smith, which most of the people thought that Daniel Smith's leadership with the Wild Rose would be the winning party?
There were quite a few of us who thought that way, including myself. Politics is interesting is that, first of all, we're a new party, so there's always that skepticism or that wondering what we would be about, as well as, us in the party know each other well, but the people of, the province of Alberta didn't know us all that well. And then, as in any campaign, at the end with some of the scare tactics and stuff that were implemented, people got a little bit afraid. Now, don't forget, we only, I think out of the 87 seats, I think we finished second in about 55 of them. So 1 or 2% can be the difference between having 17 seats or having enough to form a government. So,
wow.
It's not, people seem to look at it and say, well, we got 17 seats out of 87, and there's another 70 out there that went to the Liberals, and the NDP picked up a couple. Therefore, we got defeated badly, but 3%, and we would have formed the government. So,
my other one is, why would you think when politicians run for an office, they always come to the community and they show caring and all that stuff, but when the election is done, all that publicity coming to the area, meeting with, especially there are some new Canadians who feel a little bit difficult to understand the voting system, and they meet with politicians when election is down. very close election, then they will meet all the politicians, and once they win, they will not come back to the same community.
Well, part of it's natural in the sense that when you're running for an election, you put your full time efforts into winning that election. Your office in Edmonton or City Hall or Ottawa becomes irrelevant because you have to win. And part of it is that once you get into office and you become surrounded with your duties and the paperwork and the cabinet, so you certainly don't have as much time as you want. But to neglect a group entirely is absolutely wrong. It makes one very cynical. It makes you wonder what's going on. I mean, you wouldn't expect to see them every 2 weeks as you would in a campaign, but it makes you wonder if you never see them again. You have to question that particular politician if that's the way he or she is acting.
Well, I hope the next election will come, and that's when people will think about this will come to the end of our program. And Ajak, and who have been very active involvement in the New Canadians, will highly appreciate for coming. We are very honored to have Don Weisbeck, you as our 3 times mayor and a very active politician and active volunteering in the community. And we hope to have you sometime soon with Jason Hale.
Just give me a call. I'd love to come back.
Thank you very much, Ajak.
Thank you very much.
For coming to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Okay,
for
thank you.
coming to the show, sir. This was the end of Global Village today. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you will join us next time. Same time, we'll bring the cultures of the world to your doorstep. This is your host, Ahmed Kassim. Thank you.